The year is basically done, so it's probably about time I told you guys what I've been reading since July. As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm coming off of a cold, so lets you know how health-wise my year really has been overall. A never-ending parade of illnesses. But we might as well talk about what I've been reading. I read Dark Age by Pierce Brown. I have a video review of it. I gave it 5 stars. It's brilliant. I love it. And I said that it's the best book since Golden Sun, and I think it's kind of on par with Golden Sun in terms of just how well crafted it is. I read both Strange the Dreamer and The Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor, so this is the Strange the Dreamer duology. I gave Strange the Dreamer 4 stars, and I gave The Muse of Nightmares 3 stars. I didn't like it nearly as much as the first book, and I will say the first book, you really do have to just like slog through the first 100-something pages. It is a really tough book to get started, and once it gets started, you realize how important those opening pages were, and it is beautiful. I mean, Laini Taylor's writing is stunning. I didn't like this story nearly as much as I enjoyed reading Daughter of Smoke and Bone, and I especially thought that Muse of Nightmares was just kind of okay compared to the first novel. I read Akhenaten, Egypt's False Prophet by Nicholas Reeves. This was a nonfiction book that I picked up when my boyfriend and I were in London. We were at the British Museum and I saw it. I think the Amarna period of Egypt, if you can hear that clicking, that's Peg walking around. I think the Amarna period of ancient Egypt is fascinating, and so anytime I see a book on Akhenaten, it's going to catch my eye, and I thought this book was quite interesting. It's not too long, it's not too dense, it's a pretty easy read, and I think it gives some really good context for the world that Akhenaten kind of grew up in and was living through. I don't know. I find that subject interesting, so I like the book. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. Then I rolled through a couple arcs that had been sitting for far too long on my shelf. I read The Reader by Tracy Chee, which is the first book in the Sea of Ink and Gold series. I gave this like 3-ish stars. I thought it was okay. I think it could have been better, but it was certainly not the worst arc that I read of the 3. That would go to Grace and Fury by Tracy Bangart, or Bangart. I'm not sure how to say his person's name. It's the first book, I guess, in a series. It's basically pitches like, what if you had The Handmaid's Tale but made it a romance? And I was already like, well, you lost me at that pitch because I don't particularly like The Handmaid's Tale, and I certainly didn't need a romance in it. I gave it 1 star. I thought it was pretty horrid. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the world. I didn't like the writing. Yeah, no, not a huge fan. And then I read Cursed by Tom Wheeler. This, I know, is becoming a movie or a series on Netflix before it's even released, which is admittedly impressive. I gave this book 2 stars. It's an Arthurian retelling, but I didn't think it brought anything really new to the table. The idea is that it's following Nimue, who's also known as the Lady of the Lake, who gives Arthur Excalibur, and I was like, that's such a cool character to tell the story from, because Nimue is a pretty badass chick. In fact, she locked Merlin in a tree once because he was a creepy old perv. But we don't really get anything interesting. As I said, I could describe this book as just like one big heavy sigh. It exists. I'm sure there are people who will like it, but I thought it was pretty prosaic and it wasn't great. I read Dark Dawn, the 3rd and final book in the Nevernight Chronicle by Jay Kristoff, and I gave it 4 stars, and this is a book that I could see the ending will piss people off. It was rather like when I read the final book in the, gosh, what was the name of that series? It was by Erica Johansson, Queen of the Tearling series. That's what, oh. Yes, Mama. You want your butt? You want your butt on my chair? Come in. Oh. Queen of the Tearling, the ending to that series was definitely a, like, you're gonna like it or it's just gonna piss you off. And I think Dark Dawn was kind of the same way, where I finished it and went, I can see a lot of people being pissed off with this. And so I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. I thought it was a good ending. There were some things that I was just like, I don't care too much about, but I've loved this series from the get-go. I think it's fun, and I am glad to see Jay Kristoff just sort of write these really, like, violent, crazy stories, and I'm so ready for his vampire series. You have no idea, but 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good ending. I listened to Over the Top, A Raw Journey to Self-Love by Jonathan Van Ness. I gave this 4.5, 5 stars. It's a good listen. Jonathan Van Ness has obviously been made very famous from the web series Game of Thrones, and then also being one of the Fab Five on Queer Eye, and I really didn't know much about his life. It was an interesting listen, and he has a certain way about him, and especially when he reads the novel that you're just like, ah, nice. A really nice, easy listen. I listened to Evil Has a Name, The Untold Story of the Golden State Killer Investigation. This was an Audible original. I got it for free. It was very interesting. This is an investigation I knew almost nothing about. Other than I knew Patton Oswalt's late wife was somehow involved in it. I think she penned the name Golden State Killer. And she is certainly mentioned in this because she played a part in the investigation. But yeah, I gave it 4 stars. It's a really good true crime listen if that's what you're into. I read American Tabloid by James Ellroy. This is the first book in his Underworld USA trilogy. Now, James Ellroy, I love his LA Quartet, which some famous books out of it that have been made into movies being LA Confidential and The Black Dahlia. I love those books. I think they're fantastic. And he knew that world. He knew it very well. An American Tabloid involves the world of the Teamsters, the JFK presidential run, all the way through his assassination. And it's a very different style for what I'm used to with James Ellroy. He's known for writing this very like telegrammatic, almost staccato style short sentences. This one, I was like, oh wow, there's compound sentences and I don't know what to do with this. I gave it 3.5, 4 stars. It's really good, but I can't necessarily say I enjoyed the reading experience. It's not an easy book to read. And I did read its sequel, The Cold 6000, which is also not an easy read. I also gave that like 3.5, 4 stars, where I think they're really great. Am I ever going to want to read them again? No. No. I read them once. I don't need to read them again. They are so bleak. Like a lot of Ellroy's writing is just so goddamn bleak, especially on human nature. So really great books. Could never read them again. I read Chernobyl 12340, The Incredible True Story of the World's Worst Nuclear Disaster by Andrew Leatherbarrow, because Chernobyl is fabulous and I'm still obsessed with it. It's the best TV show I've seen all year. And this was a book that had been mentioned by Craig Mazin, the writer, as one that was a good resource if you wanted to know more about Chernobyl. It's just a really nice kind of historical overview of the event, as well as interspersed with Leatherbarrow's own trip to photograph Chernobyl. So it was sort of this interesting combination of telling the story of what happened while telling us his experience in Chernobyl. I listened to Midnight Sun by James Domick Jr. This is another one of the Audible originals that I got for free. This involves a murder investigation attempted murder investigation up in Alaska. And it involves these sort of mythical people of the Arctic tribes there called the Inyukun, which I guess are... I really don't fully know what they were. I'm trying to find the right words that are not insensitive or rude or slanderous or derogatory. The only way I can describe it is that it's this mythical tribe of little people. It was sort of what I gathered out of it, and James Domick Jr. talks about there was this native actor who got charged with murder and attempted murder because of this whole strange few days that happened, and he claimed he saw the Inyukun, and it was definitely interesting. It was kind of informative. It gave a look at a life that I don't know. I don't really know much about life in Alaska, and certainly not out on the res or in small villages in Alaska. But so it was interesting. I gave it 4 stars, but I kind of don't know how to describe it. It's sort of true crime. It's sort of, it's not. It's there. I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I gave it 5 stars. It's fucking phenomenal. I don't know why she hasn't been writing this kind of fiction to begin with. She should stay in adult fiction, because when she gets the chance to cut loose, she cuts loose. Ninth House was brilliant. I loved it. I did not know it was going to be a duology. Now I know, and I'm ready for the sequel, because I got left on that mild kind of cliffhanger that leaves me going like, oh yeah, you better give me that second book. give me it now. I want it. This is the dark academia novel with supernatural elements that I needed in my life, and so good. And finally, I read The Queens of Innis Lear by Tessa Gratton. I gave this 4 stars. It is, you can probably guess, a retelling of the King Lear story, most famous from Shakespeare's play, except it takes the time to focus on the 3 sisters. And it creates this whole magic system surrounding the island of Lear, and I thought that was so good. I thought a lot of the writing was really nice. It's a little slow, but, not the worst I've ever read in terms of slowness. The only thing is that, like, if you know the story of King Lear, you know how it's gonna go. Like, you know what's gonna happen to these characters, which I suppose made it almost a little anticlimactic by the time I got to them. And that was kind of my only real ding, is that, like, yeah, I know the story of King Lear. So reading it, it's sort of just like, oh, well, I know what's gonna happen. So there is that. But yeah. I don't think I'm going to be able to update with new books by the end of this year, because I know my schedule. It ain't going to happen.
Thanks for watching me ramble today. If you'd like to see more from me, go ahead and click that button with my face on it. It'll take you to my channel, where I ramble about a whole lot of different things. Got some thoughts of your own? Go ahead and leave them down in the comments. And make sure that if you want to see more ramblings from me, you click that little subscribe button. That's it for me today, you guys, so until next time, cheers.